Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and WeissAdvice here on YouTube. Just got back from NAMM, so this is up a day late. I'm totally disheveled and crazy. I'm covered in dog hair because my dogs were happy to see me. But anyway, here we are. I was at NAMM. I finally was able to connect with Ryan Schwab at Schwab Digital. He got me a copy of Gold Clip to try out. Been meaning to try this out for a long time. I happen to be working on a dubstep influenced record where clipping is a very important part of the process, so I thought I would use this as a good vehicle for discussing some important concepts in clipping drums and making space. So before we get into the concepts themselves, let me just play this down without any of the clipping effects on and kind of explain some of the ideas. So when we talk about dubstep, dubstep has had a certain evolution, going from original dub, going into more of the like early 2000s dubstep, where it was a combination of electronica meets original dub, when I think of like Burial Ground, which sounds completely different, and then of course the, without trying to sound pejorative, the more bro step kind of thing, which of course Skrillex became massively popular for. This kind of walks in between the line of like its own dub thing versus the more Skrillexy thing. It's kind of in the middle, so I'm not trying to go full on like just make everything as aggressive as possible, but there's certainly a degree of aggression that is important here. Now, one thing that we have to get out of the way is our mindfulness toward the integrity of the sound. When we're talking about things like a lot of classic rock type of stuff, jazz, you know, a lot of the hip hop stuff, pop stuff, we want to preserve a certain amount of breathing and air in the drums, a naturalness to the tone, a full excursion. That stuff goes out the window in EDM, especially in dubstep influenced stuff. So if we go in on our kick right here, we can see that it's pretty pancaked. So the idea of clipping it more might sound a little crazy. We have to dismiss what our logic brain is going to say, what's right and wrong, and we have to get into what is actually going to work for the record. So I'm going to pop into the verse here. I'm going to play the kick without any of my processing on, and then I'm going to put the processing on and explain what's happening. So it does not sound bad. This choice of kick is definitely influenced more by like other genres like Afro and other types of EDM than it is by dubstep specifically. I want to move it a little bit more into that lane of dubstep in terms of what we traditionally think of. A lot of the style and sound comes from trying to push things as much as possible. So in order to do that on that kick, what we need to do is get some of the energy out of the sub. It doesn't sound bad, but there's already plenty of energy in the 808s. So we're going to get some of the energy in the kick out of the sub range, let the 808 have it, and we're going to push that energy more into the upper range and 200 hertz kind of range. So the first thing I'm doing here is just some EQ. And what you'll see is that I'm pulling out about 4 dB of lows, which is a little counterintuitive when we're thinking about kick drums, and then I'm adding about 6 dB of top end, and it's top end from the upper mid, so it's like 1.5K. So this is a very big shift right away. Let's get here. Right, so it raises it up in the speaker. It doesn't make it sound better in solo, it makes it sound more appropriate for the genre and also makes it sound bigger in context, and that's the important thing. So here's with just the EQ move. You can still tell it's a little weak, and that's where this kind of finishing idea of clipping comes in. There are many clippers out there. You can certainly find a way to make this idea work with any of them, but I am really, really impressed with Gold Clip. I can see why so many of my engineer buddies have been telling me, like, dude, you just got to get this. It really genuinely is a great clipper with a lot of personality. So what I'm going to do here is use this not just to get more loudness in terms of like how much dynamic range I have by limiting the overall transient. We don't really need that in this kick. What I'm actually doing is I'm sort of pushing that energy into the 200 hertz, 150, 200 hertz, 250 hertz range, but doing it through distortion rather than EQ. I've already done it with the EQ a little bit. This is going to get me some extra forwardness in a different, more harmonic way. So here's our before and after in solo. And you can hear it gets just a touch more forwardness. The actual overall level is about the same. The other thing I want to point out is that this kick was already pancaked to begin with. We're not really changing the shape of the kick here that much. It's not like suddenly like, oh no, this kick is too clipped for the genre. No, the kick was already pancaked. Like, this is already the intention, right? So we haven't gone off the map in any way. And now it sounds like this. So it sits forward almost more like it was a lead vocal in some ways. And I think that that's a really important concept, especially in the EDM world. Like the kick and the snare sitting forward and coming forward like a lead vocal, it allows for two things to happen. One, it gives us that power, that energy, that aggression that we're typically looking for in the genre. Two, it's going to allow us to get our records louder overall at the end of the day. EDM is a live music genre where DJs get competitive and want to hear the loudest thing possible. I know loudness is a whole thing, but that's part of the genre. And it also allows us to get everything else around the drums to be a little bit bigger, because now the drums are standing up on their own. So the next thing that I want to mention is that when we're clipping our drums, we have two options. We can either clip them individually or we can clip them together. And oftentimes I like to bus my layers to clip and act against the clipper in a combination. So both of my kick layers here, my punchy kick and my damped kick, are coming down to this clipper right here and being clipped together. This way, when it's adding energy, it's also constraining the energy. So we're getting more impact, more distortion, more aggression, but we're still keeping the levels a little bit more controlled. This will help when we're trying to make our choruses really big and we push up all of our lead synths and we have these big side things. Then we're not running into the limiter at the end going like, oh dang, I was able to get it up to like -6 in the verse, fine, but now as soon as the chorus is hitting, it's all going to hell. So I kind of like the clipper in there for that as well, but it also creates a nice glue and harmonic combination. So together before, and then after. And so it becomes more aggressive. It actually sounds a little louder, but it's actually a lower peak signal. And then in context, it sounds like this. So really, really useful, and you'll notice that that first impact sounds huge, but level-wise, it's no different than this. Okay, let's move on down to the snare. The only thing I want to add on to this idea when we're clipping our drums is going to be that not only are we listening for the color and for the dynamic, but we're also listening to the duration of things. So these snares, for example, like this one right here, there's a duration, there's a tail built into the sample. When I clip, that tail is going to stand out. So that actually helps with the rhythmic timing, because instead of it going boom, ta, it's going boom, ta, which is a little different. It feels a little heavier, not because of the frequency spectrum, but because of the length of the release. And that's really, really important both for rhythm and impact. So here's our quick little before. And our after. So everything comes forward a little bit. Now let me play it in context before. You can already tell it needs to stand up a little bit after. So this is a mix in progress. That ta thing that I'm talking about, I want to bring that out even more. So that might involve EQing the low end of the snare a little bit. It might revolve around maybe some additional compression on the individual snare layer itself, but it's getting a lot more into that vein just right off the bat with no real processing on anything. There's a couple trim plugins. All of my other effects I didn't really like, so I took them off. So really we're just hearing the snares clipped together. The last thing is that different contexts of clipping will make different sounds. For the more aggressive snare that I wanted, I went with the hard clipping and the modern sound. With the kicks, I went for something that was a little bit more delicate, mostly because the shape was already pretty heavily compressed. So I have a soft clipping knee going on here, which is called modern, and then I also have it on modern mode here. But I'm actually doing a fair amount of clipping, and it holds up pretty well. So, all right, if you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notifications so you get notified. And lastly, you know what we say here at WeissAdvice. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.